What if I told you that one of the most boring products in America might be hiding one of the most interesting profit stories in business? Every week, millions of households toss a bottle of laundry detergent into their shopping carts without thinking twice about it. It's not exciting. It's not trendy. It's not the kind of product that goes viral on social media. But behind those bottles sits a business that can generate millions of dollars in revenue year after year. Today, we're meeting Michael Carter, the founder of Carter Clean Company, a laundry detergent company that turned a simple household necessity into a growing business. And the question we're trying to answer is simple: just how profitable is a laundry detergent business really? Because from the outside, it looks straightforward. You create a formula, pour it into bottles, put it on shelves, and wait for customers to buy it. But every bottle that leaves the warehouse carries a hidden story. There are raw materials, packaging costs, manufacturing expenses, shipping fees, storage costs, retailer margins, advertising budgets, and countless other expenses that most people never see. So when a bottle sells for $18, how much of that money actually stays in the business? That's exactly what we're here to find out. We're going to follow the money from the moment a bottle is produced until it reaches a customer's laundry room. We'll break down the costs, the margins, the risks, and the opportunities that come with competing in one of the largest consumer product industries in America. And what makes this story even more interesting is that Michael isn't competing against small local businesses. He's competing against some of the biggest consumer brands on the planet. Yet despite that challenge, his company continues to grow. So before we look at the numbers, the manufacturing process, and the economics behind every bottle sold, we need to understand why someone would choose to enter such a competitive industry in the first place. Because that decision ended up shaping everything that came next. For Michael Carter, the opportunity was not hidden inside a revolutionary invention or a breakthrough. Technology. It was sitting in plain sight on grocery store shelves across America. Long before Carter Clean Company existed, Michael had spent years studying consumer products and noticing a pattern that most people ignored. The products people bought once were unpredictable. Trends came and went. Customer interest changed constantly. But the products people needed every single month followed a completely different set of rules. Laundry detergent was one of those products. Whether the economy was booming or slowing down, people still needed clean clothes. Families still washed laundry. Apartment renters still washed laundry. College students still washed laundry. Demand never disappeared. That consistency caught Michael's attention. At first, he was not looking to build a detergent company at all. He was researching different consumer product businesses and comparing categories. Some products offered high margins but low repeat purchases. Others had strong demand but fierce competition with almost no profit left for smaller brands. The more he researched, the more he became interested in products that customers bought over and over again without needing to be convinced every time. He began studying the household cleaning industry and quickly discovered that repeat customers were often worth far more than new customers. If someone liked a detergent and trusted the results, there was a good chance they would buy it again next month and the month after that. That created a business model that could become increasingly valuable over time. But there was a problem. The market was already dominated by massive brands with enormous advertising budgets. Competing directly against industry giants seemed almost impossible. Instead of trying to beat them at their own game, Michael started asking a different question. What specific customers were being overlooked? What needs were not being fully addressed? As he spoke with consumers, read reviews, and studied purchasing behavior, he realized many customers were looking for alternatives that felt more personal, more specialized, and more aligned with their preferences. That insight became the foundation for Carter Clean Company. However, spotting an opportunity and building a product are two completely different challenges. Because once Michael decided to move forward, he faced the first major obstacle every product entrepreneur eventually encounters. How much money would it actually take to create the first batch and get it into customers' hands? Once Michael committed to the idea, the next challenge was figuring out how much money it would take to move from research to reality. Many people assume consumer product businesses require massive factories and millions of dollars in equipment, but that is not always how modern brands begin. Michael's goal was not to build a giant manufacturing operation on day one. His goal was to create a product good enough to test whether customers would actually buy it. Even so, the startup costs added up quickly. The first expense was product development. Before a single bottle could be sold, he needed a formula that delivered consistent cleaning performance and met quality standards. That meant working with industry professionals, testing different ingredient combinations, evaluating fragrances, and refining the product through multiple iterations. Then came packaging. Most consumers do not realize how much packaging influences purchasing decisions. The bottle, cap, label design, color scheme, and overall presentation all play a role in whether a customer reaches for a product or ignores it. Michael invested heavily in creating packaging that looked credible alongside established national brands. Next came inventory. Raw ingredients had to be purchased in minimum quantities. Bottles and labels often required larger orders than a startup actually needed. Suppliers preferred bigger production runs because it lowered their own costs. As a result, Michael had to commit capital before knowing exactly how quickly products would sell. Then there were compliance requirements, insurance policies, warehousing expenses, shipping materials, website development, photography, and branding. None of those costs directly improved the detergent itself, but all of them were necessary to operate a legitimate business. By the time the first production run was ready, Michael had invested tens of thousands of dollars into getting the company off the ground. For many entrepreneurs, that number might sound intimidating. But what mattered most was not the total startup investment. What mattered was understanding how that investment translated into future sales. Every dollar spent had one purpose: creating a product that could eventually generate repeat purchases. Because unlike many businesses, success here would not be determined by selling one bottle. Success would be determined by whether customers came back again and again. Still, before Michael could worry about repeat customers, he needed to answer a more immediate question. Once a bottle was produced and ready to ship, what did it actually cost to make, and how much profit was hiding inside every unit sold? At this point, the business begins to shift from theory to numbers. Because once the formula is finalized and production starts, every bottle becomes a math problem. Michael quickly learned that understanding the economics of a single unit was one of the most important skills in the entire business. On the surface, a bottle sitting on a shelf looks simple. But inside that bottle are multiple layers of cost. The liquid itself is only the beginning. There are cleaning agents, stabilizers, fragrances, preservatives, and other ingredients that must be blended to create a consistent product. Then comes the bottle. The plastic container, cap, measuring components, safety seals, labels, and shipping cartons all add cost before the product ever reaches a customer. Even something as simple as a label can have a surprising impact on profitability when thousands of units are involved. Michael explains that many new entrepreneurs underestimate packaging costs because they focus entirely on the formula. But consumers do not buy formulas. They buy finished products. Once production is complete, another set of expenses appears. Labor is required to fill bottles, inspect quality, package orders, and prepare shipments. Warehousing costs money. Inventory occupies space. Products must be moved, stored, counted, and managed. Then there is shipping. Laundry detergent is heavy. A product that weighs several pounds costs significantly more to ship than lightweight consumer goods. That reality affects pricing decisions from day one. By the time a bottle leaves the warehouse, the total cost is far higher than most people imagine. Yet despite all those expenses, the numbers can still work remarkably well when the business is managed correctly. What makes the model attractive is that many of these costs become more efficient as volume increases. Larger ingredient orders can reduce costs. Larger packaging orders can reduce costs. Better logistics can reduce costs. As sales grow, margins often improve. But none of those advantages matter if customers are not buying the product. And that brings us to the most important number in the entire business. Not the manufacturing cost. Not the shipping cost. Not even the startup investment. The number that determines whether this company succeeds or fails is how much profit remains after a customer purchases a bottle. Because that single number reveals whether the entire model is actually worth pursuing. Now we arrive at the number every entrepreneur wants to know. After all the planning, production, packaging, shipping, and marketing, how much money is actually left over from each sale? Michael explains that this is where many people completely misunderstand the business. They see a bottle selling for $18 and assume most of that money becomes profit. The reality is very different. A portion goes toward ingredients. Another portion covers packaging. Then there are labor costs, warehousing expenses, shipping materials, payment processing fees, software subscriptions, and customer support. If the sale comes through an online marketplace, platform fees take another percentage. If advertising was used to acquire the customer, that cost must also be included. By the time everything is accounted for, the amount remaining is far smaller than the original selling price. However, that does not mean the business is unattractive. In fact, understanding this reality is what allows successful operators to build profitable companies while others struggle. Michael focuses heavily on contribution margin rather than revenue. Revenue looks impressive on paper, but contribution margin reveals how much money remains to support growth. For example, if a customer purchases a bottle for $18 and all direct costs total $9, that leaves $9 available to cover overhead and profit. Improve purchasing agreements, reduce shipping costs, increase order sizes, or improve retention, and that number can improve significantly. This is why repeat customers are so valuable. The first order might barely break even after advertising expenses. The second order is often far more profitable. The third order can be even better. Over time, customer lifetime value becomes one of the most important metrics in the business. Michael learned that winning a customer once was not enough. The real objective was creating a product good enough that customers would continue purchasing month after month. That is where the economics begin to compound. A growing base of repeat buyers creates more predictable revenue, stronger cash flow, and better purchasing power with suppliers. But even with healthy margins and repeat purchases, another challenge remains. Building the product is one thing. Convincing consumers to switch from brands they have trusted for years is something entirely different. And that challenge would become one of the hardest obstacles Carter Clean Company would face as it continued to grow. The challenge was never creating a bottle of detergent. The challenge was convincing customers to abandon habits they had built over years. Think about it. Most people do not spend much time thinking about laundry products. They find something that works, buy it again, and move on with their lives. That behavior creates enormous advantages for established brands. Every customer already using a competitor represents a relationship that has to be broken before a new one can be formed. Michael quickly realized that competing on price alone would be a losing strategy. Large corporations could always manufacture at a larger scale and negotiate better supply contracts. Instead, Carter Clean Company focused on differentiation. Rather than trying to appeal to everyone, the company concentrated on specific customer groups who wanted something different from the mass market options. Some customers cared about ingredients. Others cared about fragrance profiles. Some wanted products that felt more premium. Others preferred supporting independent businesses instead of global corporations. Michael understood that customers rarely switch products because of features alone. They switch because a brand communicates a message that resonates with them. That insight shaped the company's marketing strategy from the beginning. Instead of spending huge amounts on traditional advertising, the business focused on building trust. Customer reviews became critical. User-generated content became valuable. Repeat buyers became advocates. Every positive experience helped reduce the skepticism that naturally comes with trying an unfamiliar brand. Over time, Michael noticed an interesting pattern. The customers who tried the product were often easier to retain than they were to acquire. The real bottleneck was getting that first purchase. Once customers experienced the product for themselves, many returned. That meant every marketing dollar had to be measured carefully. If customer acquisition costs became too high, profitability would disappear. If acquisition costs stayed under control, the economics became increasingly attractive. This created a constant balancing act between growth and efficiency. The company needed new customers to expand, but it also needed existing customers to continue buying. And that is where the business started discovering one of its biggest advantages. Because the most valuable customer was not the one who bought a single bottle. The most valuable customer was the one who turned that purchase into a recurring habit month after month. As the customer base grew, Michael discovered that the most powerful asset in the entire company was not the formula, the packaging, or even the brand itself. It was retention. Every time a customer came back and placed another order, the economics improved. There was no need to pay again to introduce the product. There was no need to convince that customer from scratch. The trust had already been established. That realization completely changed how Carter Clean Company approached growth. Instead of focusing only on acquiring new customers, the company began investing heavily in systems designed to increase repeat purchases. One of the most effective strategies was subscription ordering. Customers could schedule automatic deliveries at regular intervals, ensuring they never ran out of product while creating predictable recurring revenue for the business. Michael also paid close attention to customer feedback. Reviews were analyzed. Common complaints were addressed. Product improvements were made continuously. Every small improvement increased the probability that a customer would stay with the brand longer. The company also introduced bundle options that encouraged larger purchases. Instead of selling a single bottle, customers could purchase multiple units at once, increasing average order value and reducing shipping costs per unit. Email marketing became another important tool. Rather than constantly pushing promotions, the company focused on maintaining relationships with customers after the sale. Helpful content, product updates, and refill reminders helped keep the brand top of mind. Over time, these systems started producing a compounding effect. A customer acquired 6 months ago was still generating revenue. A customer acquired 12 months ago was often still buying. As retention improved, customer lifetime value increased, allowing the company to spend more confidently on acquiring new buyers. This created a cycle that accelerated growth. Strong retention supported higher acquisition spending. More acquisition brought in more customers. Better customer experiences increased retention even further. But growth creates its own challenges. Selling more units sounds exciting, yet every additional order increases pressure on inventory, production schedules, logistics, and cash flow. Michael soon realized that scaling a product business introduces a completely different set of problems than starting one. And the larger the company became, the more important operational discipline would become in determining whether growth translated into lasting profitability. As revenue increased, Michael encountered a challenge that surprises many first-time product entrepreneurs. Growth does not automatically make a business easier. In many cases, growth makes everything more complicated. When Carter Clean Company was selling a relatively small number of units each month, inventory management was straightforward. Production schedules were flexible. Cash requirements were manageable. But as demand increased, every part of the operation became more demanding. Larger inventory purchases required more cash. More inventory required additional storage space. More orders required stronger logistics systems. The company suddenly found itself making decisions months in advance instead of weeks. One of the biggest challenges involved cash flow. Suppliers often expected payment before products were manufactured. Packaging companies required deposits. Inventory had to be purchased before revenue from future sales arrived. In other words, growth frequently required spending money long before new revenue appeared. Michael explains that many businesses do not fail because they lack customers. They fail because they run out of cash while trying to serve those customers. Forecasting became critical. The company needed enough inventory to meet demand without tying up excessive capital in unsold products. Order too little and customers face delays. Order too much and cash becomes trapped in inventory sitting on warehouse shelves. Shipping created another layer of complexity. As order volume increased, transportation costs became a larger factor in profitability. Small improvements in packaging efficiency or carrier negotiations could create significant savings across thousands of shipments. Hiring also became increasingly important. A growing operation required additional support across customer service, operations, logistics, and inventory management. Michael learned that systems matter far more as a company scales. Processes that worked when the business was small often broke under larger volumes. Every stage of growth required new solutions. Yet despite these challenges, scale also created opportunities. Larger purchasing volumes improved supplier relationships. Better forecasting improved efficiency. Stronger brand recognition reduced acquisition costs. Over time, operational improvements began creating advantages that were difficult for newer competitors to replicate. But after navigating inventory, cash flow, logistics, staffing, and growth management, one final question remained. Looking back at everything required to build and scale this company, was the journey actually worth it, and would Michael choose this path again if he had to start from the beginning? After everything Michael Carter experienced building Carter Clean Company, the answer is yes, he would absolutely do it again. But he would do it differently. Looking back, the biggest lesson was that product businesses are rarely won through manufacturing alone. The formula matters. Packaging matters. Operations matter. But none of those things matter if customers never come back for a second purchase. Michael believes that many entrepreneurs spend too much time obsessing over products and not enough time understanding customer behavior. The real asset was never the inventory sitting in the warehouse. The real asset was the growing group of customers who trusted the brand enough to purchase repeatedly. If he could start over, he says he would focus on retention much earlier. He would invest more aggressively in customer relationships, subscription systems, and feedback collection from day one. Those areas generated far greater long-term value than many of the things he worried about during the early stages. For beginners considering a similar path, Michael offers straightforward advice. Do not enter the industry because you think every bottle sold creates instant profit. Learn the numbers first. Understand your costs. Understand your margins. Understand your customer acquisition expenses. Most importantly, understand how many purchases are required before a customer becomes truly profitable. The entrepreneurs who succeed are usually the ones who master the economics before they chase growth. He also recommends starting smaller than most people think they need to. Focus on proving demand before investing heavily in inventory or infrastructure. A smaller operation with strong economics is far more valuable than a larger operation with weak fundamentals. When asked for the core principle that guided the company, Michael keeps it simple. Build around products people genuinely need, create an experience they want to repeat, and measure everything. In the end, this business was never really about detergent. It was about solving a recurring problem for customers and building systems that transformed one purchase into many. That is what turned a simple household product into a scalable business. And that is ultimately what determines whether a company becomes just another product on a shelf or a business capable of growing for years to come.